The wind on Harvern Ridge did not sound like wind. It sounded like something breathing. Daniel had heard that line from a trader in the market, half joking, half warning him not to fly near the highlands. He had laughed it off then. He was not laughing now. His cargo shuttle groaned as the storm slammed into it from the side. Blue lightning crawled across the clouds in strange patterns, not like anything he had seen on any other world. The instruments on his dashboard flickered and died one by one. He gripped the controls and tried to keep the nose up, but the wind had other plans. Daniel Hale had flown supply routes for 6 years without a single serious accident. He knew every trick to keep an old shuttle alive. But no trick works when the sky itself turns against you. The last thing he saw before the shuttle hit the trees was a wall of dark green mountains rushing toward the windshield, and somewhere above them, a shadow far too large to be a bird. When he woke up, he was not in the wreck anymore. He was lying on soft moss, under a sky turning orange with early morning light. His body ached everywhere, but nothing felt broken. He sat up slowly and looked around. Tall stone cliffs rose on every side, covered in strange plants with leaves like folded paper. Somewhere nearby, water was running over rocks. He had no memory of leaving the shuttle, no memory of walking here. His flight suit was torn in places, but someone, or something, had wrapped a length of tough plant fiber around his wounded arm. It was not a bandage made by any human or any alien technology he recognized. It looked woven, almost braided, like it had been made by hands that did not use tools. Daniel stood up carefully and looked for a way out. That was when he saw the tracks. They were pressed deep into the soft ground, each print wider than his outstretched arms. He counted 4 toes on each print, tipped with something sharp enough to leave grooves in solid rock nearby. He had heard stories about a creature that lived in these highlands, stories the local aliens whispered but never explained fully. They called it the Warden. They said soldiers who went looking for it never came back. They said it was not an animal, not really, that it was something older and smarter than anything with fur and claws should be. He had thought it was just another frontier legend, the kind every dangerous world seemed to grow, like ghost stories told to keep children away from cliffs. Standing there, looking at prints large enough to swallow his own footprint twice over, the legend felt a lot less like a story. A low sound rolled across the valley, not a roar, not a growl. It was deeper than that, a sound he felt in his chest more than heard with his ears. The ground under his boots trembled slightly. Birds, or whatever passed for birds on this world, burst out of the trees in a panic and scattered into the sky. Daniel froze. Every instinct told him to run, but his legs would not move. He turned slowly toward the source of the sound and saw it emerge from between 2 massive rock formations. It was enormous, easily 3 times the height of a grown man at the shoulder, with a body built like something between a great cat and a mountain lizard, covered in dark scales that shimmered faintly blue in the morning light. Its eyes were pale gold, and they were fixed directly on him. 2 long tusks curved up from its lower jaw, scarred and chipped from what looked like decades of fighting. This was the Warden. There was no doubt in his mind. Daniel did not move. He remembered every survival lesson he had ever learned about wild animals. Stay calm, do not run, do not make sudden movements. But nothing had prepared him for something this large, this old, this clearly intelligent, studying him the way a person studies a puzzle rather than a meal. The creature took a slow step forward. The ground shook faintly again. Daniel's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He thought about the soldiers who never came back. He thought about the wrecked shuttle somewhere behind him in the trees. He thought, strangely, that if this was how it ended, at least it would be quick. But the Warden did not attack. It lowered its massive head until its golden eyes were almost level with his own, close enough that he could feel warm breath against his face. It made a low sound again, softer this time, almost curious. Then it turned, presenting its broad back to him, and waited. Daniel did not understand at first. He stood frozen, unsure what was happening, until the creature turned its head slightly and looked back at him, as if asking a question it could not put into words. Somewhere deep in his exhausted, frightened mind, a strange thought surfaced. It was not attacking him. It was offering him a way out. He walked forward on shaking legs, and before he could think too hard about what he was doing, pulled himself up onto its back, gripping the ridge of bone along its spine. The warden rose to its full height, and the world tilted beneath him. They moved through the highlands together, the legendary beast every soldier feared, carrying an ordinary human trader who had simply been trying to survive one bad storm. Neither of them knew yet that this single moment would change everything for both their people. Word travels fast when a monster breaks its own legend. By the time Daniel reached the outpost gates on the warden's back, half the settlement had already gathered to watch. Guards dropped their weapons in shock. Children were pulled indoors by frightened parents. Someone screamed. The warden simply lowered its head, let Daniel slide off near the gate, and turned back toward the highlands without another sound, leaving behind total silence and a crowd of people who did not know what they had just witnessed. Daniel barely had time to catch his breath before hands grabbed him and pulled him through the gates. He woke up hours later in a small metal room with no windows, sitting across from Counselor Rill, the leader of the alien settlement. Rill was an older alien with pale gray skin and deep lines across her face that spoke of decades spent surviving on a hostile frontier world. Her eyes studied Daniel with a mixture of suspicion and disbelief. "You will explain what happened," Rill said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "Soldiers have died trying to even get close to that creature. Entire units disappeared in those mountains, and you are telling me it carried you here on its own back, unharmed." "I'm not telling you anything yet," Daniel replied, "because I don't fully understand it myself." Rill leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Then let us start from the beginning. Your shuttle crashed 3 days ago. We found no trace of you at the wreck site. No blood, no signs of struggle. You simply vanished. Now you return riding the one creature every soldier on this planet has learned to fear. You will forgive me if I find that difficult to accept without an explanation." Daniel rubbed his eyes and tried to piece together his own memory. The details were foggy, but slowly they began to return. He remembered waking briefly, sometime during those missing days, half-conscious, and dragging himself through the underbrush after crawling from the wreck. He remembered hearing voices, alien voices, not local settlers, but strangers speaking in hushed, urgent tones. He had followed the sound out of desperation, hopping for help, and instead found a group of armed aliens gathered around strange equipment near a rocky outcrop, digging into the ground and loading crates onto a hidden transport. They had not been friendly. One of them spotted him and raised a weapon. Daniel, weak and barely able to stand, had done the only thing he could think of. He had shouted and thrown a loose rock, causing enough confusion that the group scattered, thinking they had been discovered by a larger patrol. In the chaos, something enormous had crashed through the trees behind him, and the last thing Daniel remembered clearly was the ground shaking and the strangers fleeing in terror. "There were people out there," Daniel said slowly, piecing it together as he spoke. "Not settlers. They had equipment, crates, weapons. They looked like they were digging something up or hiding something. I stumbled into them by accident. I didn't even see the warden until after they ran." Rill's expression shifted from suspicion to something sharper, more focused. "Poachers," she said quietly, almost to herself. "There have been rumors for years. Illegal harvesting operations in the protected highlands. Rare minerals, old nesting sites, resources no one is supposed to touch. We could never prove it. Every patrol we sent into that territory either turned back or never returned." "Because of the warden," Daniel said. "Because of the warden," Rill agreed. "We assumed it attacked anything that entered its territory, soldier or poacher alike, without reason. A mindless predator defending ground." She paused, studying Daniel carefully. "But if what you say is true, if you interrupted an illegal operation and the creature only appeared afterward, then perhaps our soldiers were never truly its target. Perhaps it was defending something specific, and every human or alien caught in the crossfire was assumed to be a threat." Daniel thought about the low sound the creature had made, almost curious rather than aggressive. He thought about how carefully it had approached him, how it had waited for him to climb onto its back rather than forcing him. Nothing about that behavior matched the mindless monster from local legend. "It didn't act like an animal," Daniel said. "It acted like it was making a decision, like it understood something about what I did back there." Rill said nothing for a long moment, clearly turning the idea over in her mind. Finally, she stood and walked to the door. You will remain here under guard for now, Daniel Hale, not as a prisoner, but as a witness. What you have described changes a great many assumptions this settlement has held for a very long time. I intend to find out exactly how much. She left without another word, but Daniel could see it in her eyes before she turned away. The old fear of the warden had not disappeared, but for the first time in a very long time, someone in this settlement was beginning to ask a different question. Not how to kill the beast in the mountains, but why it had never truly attacked anyone who did not deserve it. Outside the small metal room, Daniel could hear voices arguing in the hallway, and somewhere far beyond the outpost walls, the wind over Harvern Ridge carried a low sound across the valley, almost like the creature was listening too. The message arrived on a military channel that had not been used in almost a decade, ever since the last unit sent into the highlands failed to report back. Commander Voss read the report twice before he allowed himself to believe it. A human, alive, carried out of warden territory without a single injury. He set the datapad down on his desk and stared at the wall of his command post for a long moment, remembering names he had not spoken aloud in years, soldiers who had marched into those mountains under his orders and never marched back out. He had spent 10 years trying to convince the regional council to authorize another strike against the creature. 10 years of being told the cost was too high, the risk too great, that the highlands were better left alone. Now, suddenly, everyone wanted to talk about the warden again, but not the way Voss wanted them to. He arrived at the outpost by the following morning, his transport kicking up dust as it landed near the gates. He did not wait for an escort. He walked straight through the settlement toward the building where Daniel was being held, ignoring the stares of settlers who whispered his name as he passed. Commander Voss was not a popular figure in these parts, but he was respected in the way people respect a storm they have learned to survive. He found Daniel in a small courtyard, sitting under the shade of a metal awning, drinking something warm from a cup, while two guards stood nearby, more out of formality than real concern at this point. Voss studied him for a moment before speaking. "You are the one who rode the beast," Voss said. It was not a question. Daniel looked up, unbothered by the commander's sharp tone. "I didn't ride it so much as it decided to carry me. There's a difference. A difference that matters little to the families of the soldiers it killed," Voss replied coldly. He pulled a chair from a nearby table and sat down across from Daniel without asking permission. "I lost 11 men in those mountains, Mr. Hale, good soldiers, following my orders. That creature tore through their position in under a minute, and we found almost nothing left to bring home." Daniel set his cup down slowly. "I'm sorry for what happened to your people, I mean that, but from what I've learned, that creature was not attacking your men without reason. There were poachers operating in that territory, illegal harvesting, hidden equipment. If your unit was near that operation, even by accident, the warden may have assumed you were part of it." Voss's jaw tightened. "Convenient theory." "It's not a theory I'm inventing to protect myself," Daniel said. "Counselor Rill is already investigating it. I stumbled into the same group by accident, and the creature appeared only after they scattered. It didn't touch me. It carried me to safety instead." "Or it simply had not decided what to do with you yet," Voss said. "You assume too much intelligence from an animal that has killed everything that ever entered its territory, human or otherwise." Before Daniel could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "He's not assuming anything without reason, Commander. That's more than I can say for you." Inez Calder walked into the courtyard, dust still on her boots from the transport she had taken straight from the human colony the moment she heard Daniel was alive. She was Daniel's engineer and closest friend, someone who had spent years helping him keep his agging shuttle running on nothing but stubbornness and spare parts. She crossed the courtyard and placed a hand briefly on Daniel's shoulder before turning to face Voss directly. "I heard you're planning to use him as bait," she said flatly, "to draw the creature out so you can finish what your unit started years ago." Voss did not deny it. "The Council has not approved anything yet, but if there is a chance to finally end the threat that creature poses, I intend to take it." There's also a chance you're about to start a war with something that clearly understands more than you're giving it credit for, Inez shot back. And a chance that the Human Colonial Council will have serious questions about why a commander wants to use one of our people as bait for a hunting expedition. Voss's eyes narrowed slightly at the mention of the Human Colonial Council. He knew as well as anyone that outside political pressure could complicate his plans far more than any creature in the mountains. The alliance between the alien settlements and the growing human colony nearby was still new, still fragile, and no one wanted an incident that might damage it. I am not interested in starting conflicts with your people, Ms. Calder, Voss said carefully. I am interested in protecting mine. That creature has cost too many lives already. Then let me help you find out the truth first, Daniel said, standing up, before anyone decides to kill something that might be protecting all of us more than you realize. Voss studied him for a long moment, weighing the risk of ignoring a man who had somehow survived the impossible against the risk of provoking a conflict he was not authorized to start. Finally, he stood. You have 3 days, Voss said. Prove your theory, or I proceed with my own plans, with or without council approval. He turned and walked out of the courtyard without another word, leaving Daniel and Inez standing together under the metal awning, both of them realizing that the real danger might not be the warden at all, but the people determined to destroy it before the truth ever came out. Rain had not touched Harvern Ridge in weeks, but the morning Daniel returned, the sky opened up, as if the highlands themselves knew something important was about to happen. Councillor Rill had agreed to let him go back, against the advice of nearly everyone around her. She stood at the outpost gate as Daniel prepared to leave, a thin cloak pulled over her shoulders against the rain. You understand what you are risking, she said. If you are wrong about this creature, there may be nothing left of you to bring back a second time. I understand, Daniel said, but if I'm right and nobody proves it before Voss gets his approval, there won't be a second chance for the warden either. Rill nodded slowly and stepped aside. Inez wanted to come with him, but Daniel had convinced her to stay behind and keep watch on Voss's movements instead, worried that the commander would not wait quietly for 3 days if he thought Daniel was buying time rather than gathering proof. It was a risk either way, but Daniel needed someone he trusted watching his back from the settlement while he faced the highlands alone. The climb into warden territory was harder this time, now that he was fully conscious and aware of every danger around him. The storm from days earlier had torn branches across the trail, and the ground was slick with mud and fallen leaves. Daniel moved carefully, following the same general direction he remembered from his half-conscious escape. Searching for any sign of the hidden operation he had stumbled into before. He found the site by mid-afternoon. The rocky outcrop was exactly as he remembered, though the poachers had clearly returned since his last visit and cleared away most of their equipment in a hurry. Still, they had left traces behind, disturbed soil where something had been dug up, broken crates discarded near the tree line, and strange markings scratched into the rock that Daniel did not recognize but suspected were coordinates or symbols used to mark the location for return visits. He was crouched near the crates, examining a discarded data chip he had found half buried in the mud when the ground trembled beneath him. He stood slowly and turned to find the warden watching him from the tree line, golden eyes catching the dim light filtering through the storm clouds above. This time, Daniel did not freeze in fear. He simply held perfectly still and waited. The creature approached at an unhurried pace, circling the excavation site with what looked unmistakably like anger, low rumbling sounds building in its chest as it studied the disturbed ground. It pressed one massive claw into the churned earth, almost as if confirming that something precious had been taken from this place. They're still coming back, Daniel said quietly, unsure if the creature could understand him, but needing to say it anyway. Whatever this place means to you, they haven't stopped. The warden turned its head toward him, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, deliberately, the creature nudged one of the broken crates toward him with its snout, before stepping back and waiting. Daniel knelt down and opened the crate carefully. Inside, wrapped in protective material, were small crystalline structures unlike anything he had seen before, pale blue and faintly warm to the touch, arranged in careful rows as if someone had specifically selected and preserved them. He realized with a slow, sinking understanding what he was looking at. "Eggs," he whispered. "These are eggs." The warden made a low, mournful sound that needed no translation. This was not simply territory being defended. This was a nesting ground, generations old, and the poachers had been stealing its future one crate at a time, disguising the theft as mineral harvesting to avoid suspicion. No wonder the creature had killed anyone who came near. It had been trying to protect the last of its kind. Daniel felt something shift inside him, a mixture of anger at what he had uncovered, and a deep, unexpected sympathy for the creature everyone had called a mindless monster. He carefully closed the crate again and looked up at the warden. "I need to show this to the people back at the settlement," he said. "If they see this, really see it, they'll understand. But there's a commander coming, someone who still wants to hunt you down before anyone believes the truth. I need you to trust me a little longer." He did not know if the warden understood his words, but it lowered its head toward him slowly, almost like a nod, and allowed him to lift the crate carefully onto its back alongside himself. It was an unspoken agreement, formed without language, built entirely on the strange trust that had grown between them since that first storm. As they made their way back down the mountain together, Daniel activated a small recording device Inez had given him before he left, capturing images of the nesting site, the stolen eggs, and the desperate creature that had spent years defending them alone against a threat no one else had believed existed. Somewhere behind them, hidden in the trees, a figure lowered a pair of binoculars and quietly relayed a message over a secure military channel. Commander Voss had not waited quietly for 3 days after all. The first shot cracked through the trees before Daniel even realized soldiers had surrounded them. He had been halfway down the mountain trail, the warden moving carefully beneath him with the crate of eggs secured against its back, when the forest suddenly erupted with armed figures emerging from the underbrush. Commander Voss stood among them, weapon raised, his expression hard and unreadable in the gray afternoon light. "Get down from there, Mr. Hale," Voss ordered, "now before this goes wrong." "You don't understand what you're doing," Daniel shouted back, gripping the crate tightly as the warden shifted uneasily beneath him, sensing the sudden threat surrounding them. "This isn't what you think it is. I have proof, real proof, that this creature was never the enemy." "I have 3 days of patience that ran out early," Voss said, "and a creature standing in front of me that has killed more of my people than any enemy I have faced in this sector. Proof or not, I'm not willing to gamble more lives on your theory." The soldiers around him tensed, weapons trained on the massive creature. The warden let out a low warning growl, powerful enough that Daniel felt it vibrate through the ground beneath its feet, but it did not attack. It simply lowered its body slightly, positioning itself protectively as if shielding both Daniel and the crate of eggs behind its own bulk. "Look at what it's doing," Daniel called out, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "It could tear through your entire unit in seconds. You know that better than anyone, Commander, but it's not attacking, it's protecting us. Doesn't that tell you something?" Voss hesitated, his weapon still raised, but his finger no longer resting quite so firmly against the trigger. Years of hardened instinct told him to fire, to finish what had haunted him for a decade. But something about the creature's behavior did not match the mindless fury he remembered from that day years ago when he lost 11 soldiers in these same mountains. "Show me," Voss said finally, his voice tight with restrained tension. "Whatever proof you claim to have, show me now or I give the order." Daniel did not waste time arguing. He pulled out the small recording device and activated it, projecting the images he had captured directly onto a portable display one of the nearby soldiers carried for field communications. The images appeared clearly despite the gray light, showing the excavation site, the broken crates, the disturbed nesting ground, and finally, the pale blue eggs carefully preserved inside their containers. "These are eggs," Daniel said, loud enough for every soldier present to hear. "This creature is the last of its kind, guarding the last nesting ground of its species. The people your unit encountered years ago were not innocent settlers or lost travelers. There have been poachers operating illegally in this territory for years, stealing these eggs and disguising it as mineral harvesting. The warden was not attacking soldiers at random. It was defending its own future against people who saw it as nothing more than an obstacle to profit. A murmur spread through the assembled soldiers as they studied the images. Even Voss's hardened expression shifted slightly, old certainty cracking under the weight of evidence he could not easily dismiss. "This does not explain everything," Voss said, though his voice carried less conviction now. "My unit was searching for a lost supply convoy, nothing more. We had no connection to any poaching operation." "Maybe your unit stumbled into the same trap I did," Daniel said. "Wrong place, wrong time, mistaken for a threat to something this creature has spent its entire life protecting alone. I'm not saying it was right that people died. I'm saying there's a reason behind it that no one ever bothered to look for, because it was easier to call it a mindless monster than admit we might have been the real threat all along." Silence fell over the mountainside, broken only by the sound of rain beginning to fall again through the canopy above. Voss stared at the images on the display for a long moment, memories of the soldiers he had lost warring with the evidence in front of him. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his weapon. "Stand down," he ordered his unit, his voice rough. "All of you stand down." The soldiers hesitated only briefly before lowering their weapons as well, watching in stunned silence as the massive creature that had haunted their nightmares for years remained perfectly still, showing no aggression despite having every opportunity and every reason to strike. Voss walked forward slowly, stopping a short distance from the warden, close enough that he could have reached out and touched it if he dared. He studied the creature's scarred face, the old wounds visible beneath its dark scales, evidence of years spent fighting a war it never chose, defending something it could never fully explain to the very people who feared it most. "I owe someone an apology," Voss said quietly, though it was unclear whether he meant the creature, the soldiers he had lost, or himself. "And I owe this settlement the truth about what has really been happening in these mountains." He turned to one of his officers. "Get me a secure channel to the council, now, and find out who exactly has been authorizing illegal excavation permits in protected territory. Someone made this operation possible, and I intend to find out who." As the storm cleared and evening light broke through the clouds above Harvern Ridge, Daniel finally allowed himself to relax, still seated on the warden's back, the crate of eggs safe behind him. For the first time since the crash that started everything, it felt like the truth might finally have a chance to matter more than the fear that had ruled these highlands for far too long. 3 months later, the mountains of Harvern Ridge looked different, though the stone cliffs and folded green leaves had not changed at all. What had changed was everything surrounding them. The investigation Voss launched that day in the highlands unraveled faster than anyone expected. The data chip Daniel had recovered from the excavation site led investigators to a network of corrupt officials who had been quietly approving illegal mining permits in protected territory for years, all while publicly denying that any activity was taking place in warden territory. Several officials were removed from their positions. The poaching operation was shut down completely, its remaining equipment and personnel captured within weeks, once the council finally had reason to look in the right direction. The highlands were declared a fully protected zone, with strict laws against any excavation or resource harvesting within its borders. For the first time in generations, the last nesting ground of the warden's species stood safe from outside threats, guarded not only by the creature itself, but by laws finally written with the truth in mind. Daniel stood at the edge of the settlement one quiet evening, watching construction crews finish work on a new observation post built near the base of the ridge, designed to monitor and protect the highlands rather than threaten them. Councillor Rill approached and stood beside him, watching the same view. "The council has approved the treaty," she said. "Formal recognition of the highlands as protected territory, shared oversight between our settlement and your human colony. It would not have happened without what you did up there. It wouldn't have happened without the warden trusting me enough to show me the truth, Daniel replied. I just carried the evidence back down the mountain. Rill allowed herself a small, rare smile. There are many humans who could have found themselves in your position and simply run for their lives the moment they saw that creature. Instead, you climbed onto its back. That took something most people, human or otherwise, do not have. Or it took someone stubborn enough not to know when to be afraid, Daniel said, and Rill's smile widened slightly at that. Inez joined them a moment later, carrying 2 cups of something warm, handing one to Daniel as she looked out over the highlands herself. She had spent the last 3 months working closely with the settlement's engineers, helping design monitoring equipment that could track illegal activity in the protected zone without disturbing the wildlife it was meant to protect, a project that had quickly become as important to her as fixing shuttles ever had been. Commander Voss sent a message this morning, she said. He's requesting a formal meeting, something about proposing a joint patrol unit, human and alien soldiers working together to protect the highlands instead of hunting through them. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Voss, working with a joint patrol unit, never thought I'd see the day. People change when they finally see the truth clearly enough, Inez said. Guess that includes hardened commanders too. In the distance, beyond the observation post and the edge of the settlement, a familiar shape moved along the ridgeline, massive and unmistakable even from this distance. The warden had grown less cautious around the settlement in recent weeks, occasionally appearing at the edge of the highlands where it could be seen by anyone willing to look, no longer forced to hide entirely in the shadows of a territory it once had to defend alone. Word of what happened on Harvern Ridge had spread far beyond the local settlement, carried along trade routes and colonial networks until it reached ears across the frontier. The story of a human trader who had earned the trust of the most feared creature on the planet became something people told not as a warning anymore, but as an example, proof that understanding could succeed where fear and violence never had. Daniel had been offered several positions since then, official titles from both the Alien Council and the human colonial government, roles focused on diplomacy and protected wildlife management, official recognition of what he had already been doing unofficially for months. He had turned most of them down, preferring to remain simply a trader who occasionally helped bridge the gap between 2 peoples who had spent too long assuming the worst about each other and about the ancient guardian living quietly in the mountains between them. As the sun began to set over Harvern Ridge, painting the cliffs in soft orange light, the warden let out a low sound across the valley, the same deep tone Daniel remembered from that very first storm, though it no longer carried the same weight of fear it once had. It sounded almost peaceful now, a guardian calling out simply to be heard, no longer alone in defending what it had spent a lifetime protecting. Daniel raised his cup slightly toward the distant ridge line, a small, quiet gesture of respect between 2 very different beings who had somehow, against every expectation, learned to trust one another. Rest easy, he said softly. Nobody's coming for your mountain anymore. Somewhere in the fading light, the warden turned its great head toward the settlement, watching for a long moment before disappearing back into the highlands it had protected for longer than anyone could remember, finally free to guard its home in peace rather than fear.